To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Road Home. The 18-wheeler hummed through the Nevada desert as Marcus Bauer gripped the steering wheel, his weathered hands steady despite 36 hours of driving. At 42, Marcus had the build of a man who'd seen both sides of violence. Broad shoulders that filled his flannel shirt, arms marked with old scars that told stories he never shared, and eyes that seemed to calculate every angle in a room. To most people, he was just another long-haul trucker grinding out miles for a paycheck. They had no idea who he really was. Marcus had built this life carefully, deliberately. After 15 years in military special operations and another 5 in private security work that operated in the gray spaces between legal and necessary, he'd chosen the road as his retirement. The solitude, the endless miles, the legitimate paycheck. It was supposed to be peaceful. Simple. Clean. His phone buzzed against the dashboard. Lori's name flashed across the screen, followed by a text that made his blood run cold. "Forget us. We voted you out of the family." Before he could process the words fully, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Vernon Reeves, his wife's boss at the accounting firm where she'd worked for the past 3 years. Marcus had met Vernon twice. A soft, pale man with thinning hair and nervous hands who seemed to sweat when Marcus was around. "Marcus Bauer," he answered, keeping his voice level. Laughter erupted from the speaker, high-pitched, almost manic. "Your pathetic wife owes me more than money, and your son is collateral." The truck's engine seemed to growl in response to the rage building in Marcus's chest. In the background, he heard a voice that stopped his heart. His 8-year-old son Justin, screaming, "Dad, he's hurting me." The line went dead. Marcus pulled to the shoulder and sat in the sudden silence, his mind shifting into a mode he'd thought he'd left behind forever. The trucker named Marcus who worried about delivery schedules and fuel costs was gone. In his place sat something else entirely. A predator who'd once eliminated entire terrorist cells and made war criminals disappear into the night. His wife Lori Garner had been 25 when they met 7 years ago, working as a receptionist at a doctor's office in Reno. She was beautiful in an understated way. Auburn hair, green eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine. Marcus had been 45 miles from retirement when he walked into that office for a routine physical required by his then-employer, a security company that asked no questions about his methods. She'd flirted harmlessly, and he'd asked her to coffee. 6 months later, they were married. Justin came along 2 years after that, and Marcus thought he'd found something worth protecting. Something innocent and real. He'd been wrong. Marcus started the engine and began calculating routes, not to his scheduled delivery in Phoenix, but to Reno. He had 12 hours of driving ahead of him, 12 hours to plan. In the glove compartment, beneath insurance papers and logbooks, was a phone he hadn't used in 3 years. It connected him to people who solved problems the way Marcus used to solve them, permanently. As the miles disappeared beneath his wheels, Marcus began to understand the scope of what had happened. Lori hadn't just cheated on him. She'd made the mistake of thinking he was weak, that the quiet trucker who brought her flowers and helped Justin with homework was all there was to Marcus Bauer. She was about to learn that some wolves never lose their teeth. Chapter 2. Shadows and Secrets. 3 hours into his drive toward Reno, Marcus made his first call on the secure phone. The voice that answered was gravelly, familiar. "Tyrone Kerr." "It's me," Marcus said simply. A pause. "Fuck me, Marcus. Thought you were done with all this." "I was." Something came up. Tyrone Kerr ran a security firm in Las Vegas that catered to clients who needed problems solved quietly. He'd served under Marcus in 2 different conflicts and owed him his life 3 times over. In their world, debts like that never expired. "What do you need?" "Information first." Vernon Reeves runs an accounting firm in Reno called Reeves and Associates. "I need everything. Finances, personal life, weaknesses, fears. And I need it fast. Give me 4 hours. You back in the game?" Marcus watched the road ahead, thinking of Justin's scream. "Someone took my family. I'm going to take everything from them." The next call was harder. Casey Swanson had been Marcus's handler during his private contractor days, the man who'd convinced him to disappear into civilian life when the heat got too intense. Casey now ran a ranch in Montana, officially retired but still connected to networks that spanned the globe. "Marcus, Jesus, what's wrong? You sound different. They have my son. Casey's tone shifted immediately. Who? My wife and her boss. Some kind of setup. I need a safe house in Reno and a team. Marcus, you can't just. Casey. The single word carried the weight of everything Marcus was capable of. They hurt my boy. Either you're with me, or you're not. But don't try to stop me. A long silence. I'll make some calls. There's a house on the outskirts of town, off Mountain View Drive. Clean phones, clean weapons, medical supplies. I'll have 2 operators meet you there. Good men, completely deniable. Marcus's third call was to Douglas Bond, a hacker who'd once helped him track a kidnapped ambassador's daughter through 6 countries. Douglas had gone legitimate, running a cybersecurity company, but Marcus knew that the right motivation could bring out his darker skills. I heard you went domestic, Douglas said after the usual pleasantries. Someone made that a mistake. I need you to tear apart Vernon Reeves's digital life. Bank accounts, communications, internet history, social media, everything. And I need you to do it in a way that leaves doors open for me to walk through later. This sounds personal. They have my son. Consider it done. I'll start with his firm's servers and work outward. Marcus, Douglas's voice carried a note of concern. Be careful. You've been out of this for a while. The landscape has changed. Marcus understood. Technology had evolved, surveillance was everywhere, and the margins for error had shrunk. But some things never changed. Fear was still universal. Pain was still persuasive. And predators still recognized other predators. As he crossed into California, Marcus began to remember details about Vernon Reeves from their brief meetings. The man had soft hands and a weak handshake. He'd avoided eye contact with Marcus, the way prey animals avoided looking at wolves. But he'd stared at Lori when he thought Marcus wasn't watching, with a hunger that made Marcus's skin crawl. Lori had changed over the past year. She'd become secretive about her phone, working late more often, taking calls in private. She'd started wearing new clothes and expensive perfume that Marcus hadn't bought her. When he'd asked about it, she'd claimed Vernon was just appreciative of good employees. Now Marcus understood. Vernon hadn't just been appreciating her work ethic. The sun was setting as Marcus pulled into a truck stop 50 miles from Reno. He needed fuel, food, and a few supplies from the truck stop's general store. As he filled his tank, his secure phone buzzed with a message from Tyrone. Package delivered to location. Friends waiting. Homework done. Marcus smiled for the first time since receiving that phone call. His homework would be everything Tyrone had learned about Vernon Reeves. His friends would be the 2 operators Casey had sent. And his package would be everything he needed to remind Reno that some retirement plans could be permanently canceled. Chapter 3. Beneath the Surface. The safe house on Mountain View Drive looked like any other middle-class home in Reno's suburbs. Beige stucco, small yard, forgettable. Marcus parked his truck 3 blocks away and walked through the darkness, his senses alert for surveillance. Old habits returned as naturally as breathing. Inside, 2 men waited. The first was Austin Vasquez, late 30s, compact build, with the relaxed alertness of a career operator. The second was Taylor Williamson, younger but carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd seen action. Both men stood when Marcus entered, showing respect without subservience. Gentlemen, Marcus nodded. Casey briefed you? Basics, Austin replied. Your family situation has gone sideways. We're here to provide support. Marcus appreciated the professionalism. No questions about whether this was legal or justified, just soldiers ready to complete a mission. On the kitchen table, a tablet displayed Tyrone's research on Vernon Reeves. Marcus scrolled through the information, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Vernon Reeves was 48, twice divorced, and deeply in debt despite running what appeared to be a successful accounting firm. His gambling addiction had cost him his first 2 marriages and most of his legitimate assets. The firm was leveraged to the point of insolvency, kept afloat only by increasingly creative bookkeeping. But the most interesting details came from Vernon's personal life. He'd been arrested twice for stalking previous employees, though both cases had been dropped when the women suddenly withdrew their complaints. His internet history revealed an obsession with control and domination that went far beyond normal boundaries. This man has been planning something for months, Marcus said, studying surveillance photos of Vernon meeting with unknown associates. This isn't just about an affair. He's been targeting my family specifically. Taylor looked up from cleaning a rifle. Your wife's in on it. Marcus's jaw tightened. Lori grew up poor. Her father abandoned the family when she was 12, left them with nothing. She's always been terrified of being broke again. If Vernon convinced her I was planning to leave, or if he offered her financial security, she might have convinced herself she was protecting your son, Austin finished. By voting me out of the family and letting her lover use my boy as leverage? Marcus's voice carried a chill that made both operators glance at each other. No, she made her choice. Douglas Bond's data arrived an hour later, transmitted through encrypted channels to a laptop that would be destroyed when this was over. Vernon's digital footprint painted the picture of a man spiraling toward desperation. His gambling debts weren't just to casinos. He owed money to Hal Gilbert, a mid-level organized crime figure who specialized in high-interest loans and violent collection methods. Marcus studied photos of Hal Gilbert's operation. Gilbert ran his business out of a nightclub called the Brass Fox on the wrong side of Reno, surrounded by muscle and security cameras. If Vernon owed Gilbert money, that explained the desperation. It also provided leverage. Austin, I need you to get close to Gilbert's operation. Don't engage, just observe. I want to know his routines, his security, his weaknesses. And me? Taylor asked. Marcus pulled up surveillance photos of the accounting firm. Vernon's office building. 24-hour access, decent security, but nothing we can't handle. I need you to get inside and plant some insurance. Both men nodded and began gathering their equipment. As they prepared to leave, Austin paused at the door. Marcus? Your wife and kid, what's the endgame here? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at a family photo Douglas had pulled from Lori's social media. It showed the three of them at Justin's birthday party last month, all smiles and fake happiness. In the background, barely visible, stood Vernon Reeves. He'd been there, in Marcus's home, watching his family. My son comes home safe, Marcus said finally. Vernon Reeves learns what happens when you threaten a predator's pack. And my wife. He set the photo down. My wife learns that some choices can't be undone. Austin nodded and disappeared into the night with Taylor. Marcus was alone with his thoughts and a growing certainty that tomorrow would bring violence. He'd tried to be a different man, tried to build a life based on normal things like trust and love and family barbecues. But normal men didn't get calls threatening their children. Normal men didn't have wives who voted them out of the family. Normal men weren't equipped to handle monsters like Vernon Reeves. Fortunately, Marcus Bauer had never been a normal man. Chapter 4, The Hunt Begins. Dawn broke gray and cold as Marcus drove through Reno's awakening streets. His truck felt foreign now, too big and obvious for the work ahead. He'd need to disappear into the urban landscape, become invisible while he hunted. Austin's report from the Brass Fox had been illuminating. Hal Gilbert maintained a predictable routine, arriving at the club by 6 p.m., staying until 3 a.m., always with 2 bodyguards. More importantly, Austin had overheard a conversation about Vernon Reeves. Gilbert was expecting a payment today, and he'd made it clear that failure to deliver would result in collection activities that extended to Vernon's personal relationships. Marcus understood now. Vernon hadn't just taken Lori and Justin to hurt him. He'd taken them as insurance against Hal Gilbert. If Vernon couldn't pay his debt, he'd offer Gilbert something else. Access to Marcus's family for leverage, or worse. The accounting firm occupied the 3rd floor of a modest office building downtown. Taylor had done his work well. Security cameras showed temporary malfunctions at convenient intervals, and the building's electronic locks now recognized Marcus's modified keycard. More importantly, Taylor had placed listening devices throughout Vernon's office and conference room. Marcus sat in a stolen sedan across the street, listening through an earpiece as Vernon arrived at work. The man sounded agitated, making phone calls to people who clearly weren't answering. Lori, damn it, pick up. We had a deal. No, I can't wait another day. Gilbert's people are asking questions. A pause, then Vernon's voice again. Fine. Keep the kid somewhere Gilbert's men can't find him if this goes wrong. But if Marcus shows up, if that psycho comes looking for them, you call me immediately. Psycho. The word almost made Marcus smile. If Vernon thought he'd seen Marcus's psychotic side, he was about to receive an education. The next call was more interesting. Ricardo? It's Vernon. I need that thing we discussed. Yes, today. The situation has escalated. Ricardo Wilder ran a small-time gun trafficking operation out of a pawn shop on the outskirts of town. Marcus had identified him during his research, not smart enough to avoid surveillance, not connected enough to avoid pressure. Perfect for Marcus's purposes. Marcus spent the morning learning Reno's rhythm, reacquainting himself with urban hunting techniques. He visited the public library, studied city layouts and utility maps, identified potential safe houses and escape routes. By afternoon, he'd assembled a complete picture of Vernon's network and vulnerabilities. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Douglas. Financial records show movement. Wife's accounts active, money being moved around. Location data from her phone puts her at Mountain Rose Motel on 6th Street. Kid's location unknown. The Mountain Rose Motel was exactly what Marcus expected, a rundown establishment that catered to customers who valued privacy over comfort. He drove past twice, noting sight lines and security cameras. Lori's car was parked outside room 14. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest as he watched his wife of 7 years emerge from the motel room. She looked different, harder somehow, wearing expensive clothes he'd never seen. When she checked her phone, her expression showed none of the fear he'd expect from a woman whose child was being held hostage. She looked like a woman who was exactly where she wanted to be. That evening, Marcus put his plan into motion. He waited until Vernon left the office building, then followed at a distance as the man drove to Ricardo Wilder's pawn shop. Vernon emerged 20 minutes later carrying a small gym bag, his nervous energy replaced by something that looked like determination. Marcus called Tyrone. I need a distraction. Something that will draw police attention to the Brass Fox tonight, but not so much that they actually raid the place. How much of a distraction? Enough to make Hal Gilbert nervous about meeting with Vernon. I want him paranoid and isolated. An hour later, news reports began streaming across police scanners. Anonymous tips about drug activity at various businesses around the Brass Fox. Not enough evidence for warrants, but enough to increase police presence in the area. Gilbert would notice. He'd be wondering who was watching him and why. As night fell, Marcus positioned himself where he could observe both the motel and Vernon's apartment. His wife was still at the Mountain Rose, but she wasn't acting like a woman in hiding. She'd ordered room service, talked on her phone for hours, and seemed completely relaxed. Justin wasn't with her, which meant Vernon was keeping his son somewhere else, using him as the ultimate insurance policy. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. Tomorrow, he would begin teaching Vernon Reeves the difference between threatening a normal man's family and threatening a predator's pack. The lesson would be thorough, permanent, and utterly without mercy. Some wolves, once awakened, never went back to sleep. Chapter 5, Pressure Points. Marcus watched Vernon Reeves leave his apartment at 7 a.m., gym bag in hand, looking like a man walking to his own execution. The pressure was working. Police activity around the Brass Fox had spooked Hal Gilbert enough that he'd postponed last night's meeting. Vernon was running out of time and options. Good. Austin's voice crackled through the earpiece. Targets heading toward the industrial district. Warehouse complex on East Shore Drive. Marcus knew the area. Abandoned buildings mixed with active businesses, plenty of places to hide a scared 8-year-old boy. He followed at a distance as Vernon's car wound through increasingly desolate streets. The warehouse Vernon chose sat isolated among empty lots and rusting equipment. Marcus parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, his movements silent and precise. Through grimy windows, he could see Vernon talking animatedly to someone inside. Through his earpiece, he heard Austin's whispered report. 2 vehicles at the back entrance. At least 3 men inside with Vernon. Armed. Not just Vernon, then. He'd hired protection, probably from the same criminal network that supplied his gambling debts. Marcus smiled grimly. Vernon was thinking tactically now, which meant he understood the threat Marcus represented. Unfortunately for Vernon, understanding a threat and surviving it were 2 different things. Marcus circled the building, noting entry points and security measures. The warehouse was old, built when industrial security meant heavy locks rather than electronic surveillance. Perfect for someone who'd learned to defeat both. His phone buzzed with a message from Taylor, wife on the move. Heading toward downtown, not toward the warehouse. Interesting. If Lori was heading away from where Justin was being held, it suggested she wasn't as invested in protecting their son as Marcus had hoped. The cold certainty in his chest grew heavier. Marcus found a position where he could observe the warehouse while remaining invisible. Through a broken window, he glimpsed movement. Vernon pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. One of his hired men was setting up what looked like camera equipment. They were planning to record something. Proof of life for Hal Gilbert, maybe, or leverage against Marcus. Either way, it confirmed that Justin was inside. At 10 a.m., Vernon's phone rang loudly enough for Marcus to hear through the warehouse walls. Vernon answered with obvious reluctance. Gilbert. No, I told you, I need until tonight. Because I'm arranging payment, that's why. A pause, then Vernon's voice rose. You want proof the collateral is secure? Fine. I'll send you a video. Marcus felt something dangerous unfold in his chest. If Vernon was about to hurt Justin to prove a point to Hal Gilbert, the careful plan Marcus had been constructing would become irrelevant. He'd take the building apart with his bare hands if necessary. But Vernon surprised him. Instead of escalating, he seemed to deflate. Look, Gilbert, this isn't just about money anymore. The kid's father, he's not what I thought. I need more time to figure out how to handle him. What do you mean? Gilbert's voice was loud enough to carry through the phone. I mean, maybe we need to rethink our approach. Maybe we need to disappear for a while. Marcus smiled. Vernon was learning to be afraid. That was progress. His earpiece crackled. Marcus, you need to hear this. Douglas's voice carried unusual urgency. I've been monitoring your wife's communications. She's not just cooperating with Vernon. She's been planning this for months. There are text messages going back to January, discussing how to handle the Marcus problem permanently. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. January was when Lori had started working late, when she'd become secretive about her phone. She hadn't been seduced or manipulated by Vernon Reeves. She'd been actively planning to destroy their marriage and eliminate Marcus from their son's life. There's more, Douglas continued. She's been researching your background, trying to find information about your military service and private contractor work. She knows exactly who you are, Marcus. This whole thing is designed to provoke you into doing something that will put you in prison or worse. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the last of his restraint disappear. Lori hadn't just betrayed him. She'd studied him, learned his weaknesses, and crafted a trap designed to exploit his protective instincts. She'd gambled that he would come charging in blindly, giving her and Vernon evidence of his violent capabilities. She'd been partially right. He had come, but there was nothing blind about what happened next. Marcus keyed his radio. Austin, Taylor, new parameters. This isn't a rescue operation anymore. It's an extermination. Both men acknowledged without hesitation. They'd served with Marcus long enough to understand what that meant. Vernon Reeves had taken Marcus's son and threatened his life. Lori Bauer had betrayed her family and orchestrated the destruction of everything Marcus had built. Hal Gilbert was a predator who threatened innocent people for profit. All three had made the same mistake. They'd assumed Marcus Bauer was someone who could be pushed around, manipulated, or controlled. They were about to learn that assumption was fatal. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. By noon, Marcus had transformed the industrial district into his hunting ground. Taylor had disabled security cameras in a 2-block radius around the warehouse. Austin had positioned himself where he could intercept any escape attempt. Douglas was monitoring all electronic communications while simultaneously planting digital evidence that would redirect police attention away from their activities. The trap was ready. Now Marcus needed to spring it. He started with Ricardo Wilder, the gun dealer who'd supplied Vernon with weapons. Marcus found him alone in his pawn shop, counting money behind bulletproof glass that wouldn't stop someone who knew where to apply pressure. Marcus entered through the back door, moving like smoke through shadows until he was standing directly behind Ricardo's chair. The man didn't notice until Marcus spoke. Ricardo Wilder. Ricardo spun around, reaching for a gun that wasn't there anymore. Marcus held it casually, along with 2 backup weapons he'd found. You sold weapons to Vernon Reeves yesterday. That makes you part of a conspiracy to kidnap a federal contractor's child. Ricardo's eyes widened. Federal contractor? Man, I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Marcus's voice carried no emotion at all. But ignorance isn't immunity. You have one chance to walk away from this. Call Vernon Reeves. Tell him how Gilbert's men are looking for him, and that he needs to move his operation immediately. Why would I? Marcus moved the gun slightly, not quite pointing it at Ricardo, but making its presence unmistakable. Because if Vernon doesn't move my son to a location I can access safely, I'll come back here and we'll discuss your part in this with much less civility. Ricardo made the call. Marcus listened as Vernon's panic increased, confirming that the pressure was working exactly as intended. The next phase required more delicate timing. Marcus called Lori from a burner phone, disguising his voice enough to pass as one of Vernon's associates. "Mrs. Bauer? There's been a complication. Vernon needs you to meet him at the warehouse immediately." "What kind of complication?" Lori's voice carried irritation rather than fear. She really wasn't worried about Justin's safety. "Police interest. We need to move everything, including the package." "Package?" As if Justin were cargo rather than a terrified child. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Lori said, then paused. "Is Vernon sure about this? If Marcus is as dangerous as we think, that's exactly why we need to move now." Marcus ended the call and prepared for the endgame. Lori was coming to the warehouse, which meant all the primary players would be in one location. Perfect for what Marcus had planned. At 1:30 p.m., Lori's car pulled up to the warehouse. Marcus watched through binoculars as she entered the building, noting that she moved confidently rather than fearfully. She knew the layout, had probably been there before. This wasn't just Vernon's operation, it was theirs. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard voices from inside the warehouse. The listening devices Taylor had planted were picking up everything. "Where's the police pressure coming from?" Lori's voice, sharp with concern. "I don't know," Vernon replied. "But Gilbert's spooked, and if he thinks we can't deliver, then we disappear. We've got enough money saved, and the kid is leverage until we're clear." "What about Marcus?" Lori laughed, a sound that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Marcus is a broken-down truck driver who thinks he's still a soldier. If he shows up, we'll handle him." Marcus keyed his radio. "All units, execute." The assault began with surgical precision. Austin cut the warehouse's power while Taylor disabled the vehicles parked outside. Marcus entered through a skylight, dropping silently into the rafters above where his wife and her lover held his son. In the darkness below, emergency lighting revealed 4 figures: Vernon, Lori, 2 hired gunmen, and Justin tied to a chair in the center of the room. His son looked terrified but unharmed, which was the only thing preventing Marcus from killing everyone immediately. "What the hell?" one of the gunmen started to say. Marcus dropped from the rafters like death itself, landing behind the man and disabling him before he could finish the sentence. The second gunman spun toward the sound, giving Marcus the opening he needed to render the room secure. Vernon and Lori found themselves suddenly alone with a man they'd never really known, surrounded by unconscious guards and cut off from all escape routes. "Hello, darling," Marcus said to his wife, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of violence and 7 years of betrayal. "We need to talk." Chapter 7: Truth and Consequences. In the dim emergency lighting of the warehouse, Marcus moved like a predator among prey. Vernon Reeves backed against a wall, his soft hands shaking as he reached for the gun he'd bought from Ricardo Wilder. Marcus let him draw it, let him feel the weight of it in his hands, let him think he had some measure of control. Then Marcus smiled. "Go ahead, Vernon. Take your shot." Vernon's hands trembled so badly he could barely aim. The gun wavered between Marcus and the floor, sweat beading on Vernon's forehead despite the warehouse's chill. "You're insane," Vernon whispered. "I called the police. They're on their way." "No," Marcus said calmly, never taking his eyes off the man who'd threatened his son. "You called Ricardo, who called his contact in the police department, who discovered that there's an active federal investigation into your gambling debts and their connection to human trafficking. The police are very interested in talking to you, but they're waiting for federal agents to arrive first." Vernon's face went white. "Federal agents? Did you really think you could threaten a contractor's family without consequences? Every phone call you've made, every electronic transaction, every digital footprint, it's all been recorded and analyzed." Marcus stepped closer. "The question isn't whether you're going to prison, Vernon. The question is whether you'll live long enough to see the inside of a cell." From her position near Justin's chair, Lori spoke for the first time since Marcus had appeared. "Very dramatic, Marcus. But you're forgetting something important." Marcus turned to look at his wife of 7 years, the mother of his child, the woman he'd loved enough to give up his old life for. "What's that, darling? I know exactly who you are." Lori's voice carried a confidence that chilled the room. "I know about Afghanistan, about the private contractor work, about the people you've killed. I know you're not the peaceful truck driver you pretended to be." And Lori smiled, the expression transforming her face into something Marcus had never seen before. And I have video evidence of you threatening Vernon and his associates. I have recordings of you planning violence against civilians. I have everything I need to put you away forever. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be hours of recorded conversations. The grieving widow whose husband snapped and murdered her lover before disappearing with their son. Very tragic. Very believable. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a cold certainty that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with acceptance. You recorded everything. Every threat, every plan, every moment of you revealing your true nature. Vernon was scared, but I told him not to worry. I told him you'd destroy yourself if we just gave you enough rope. Justin, still tied to the chair, looked between his parents with confusion and terror. Dad? What's happening? Why is Mom talking like this? Marcus knelt beside his son, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. It's complicated, buddy, but I'm going to get you out of here, okay? Actually, Lori said, you're not. She nodded to Vernon, who raised his gun with new determination. The plan was always to make you disappear, Marcus. The only question was whether it would be to prison or to a grave. Marcus looked at the gun pointed at him, then at his wife's satisfied expression, then at his terrified son. Everything crystallized in that moment. The months of planning, the careful manipulation, the trap that had been designed not just to frame him, but to eliminate him entirely. He started to laugh. The sound was soft at first, almost gentle, but it grew until it filled the warehouse with echoes. Vernon's gun hand began shaking again. Lori's confident expression wavered. You know what the really funny part is? Marcus said, wiping his eyes. You didn't know who I was. You researched my background, studied my capabilities, planned for my reactions. But you missed the most important thing. What? Lori demanded. Marcus stood slowly, his movements fluid and precise. You assumed I came here alone. The warehouse's main lights suddenly blazed to life, revealing Austin and Taylor positioned at strategic points around the room. Both men held weapons trained on Vernon and Lori, their positions chosen to ensure no crossfire would endanger Justin. You see, Marcus continued conversationally. While you were planning to frame me for your murders, I was planning something entirely different. Austin, would you please tell Mrs. Bauer what you found in her car? Austin's voice carried across the warehouse. 2 kilograms of heroin, professionally packaged for distribution. Street value approximately $200,000. Lori's face went pale. That's not mine. I don't. And Taylor, what did you discover in Mr. Reeves's office? Digital evidence of embezzlement from client accounts, totaling approximately $500,000 over 18 months. Also correspondence with known drug traffickers and money launderers. Vernon's gun dropped to his side. Those aren't real. You planted evidence. Marcus smiled. Yes, we did. Just like you planted evidence to frame me. The difference is, our evidence will be discovered by federal agents who are already investigating your connection to organized crime. Your evidence will be found on phones and computers that are about to suffer tragic accidents. Marcus pulled out a small device and pressed a button. In the distance, they could hear the sound of explosions, small, controlled, designed to destroy electronic equipment without harming people. Every recording you made, every piece of evidence you gathered, every plan you thought would save you, it's all gone. Marcus's voice carried no emotion at all. But the evidence against you? That's going to last forever. Lori's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She looked at the screen and her face went white. FBI, she whispered. I'd answer that if I were you, Marcus suggested. They're very interested in your recent financial transactions and your association with known criminals. They might even offer you a deal if you cooperate fully. Vernon raised his gun again, desperation making him dangerous. You can't do this. You can't just. He never finished the sentence. Marcus moved faster than anyone in the room could follow, disarming Vernon and leaving him unconscious on the warehouse floor in a matter of seconds. I can, Marcus said to no one in particular. And I did. Chapter 8. In-game. The FBI arrived exactly 43 minutes later, just as Marcus had calculated. Special Agent Carol Moore led a team of 8 agents into the warehouse, finding exactly what the anonymous tip had promised: evidence of drug trafficking, money laundering, and kidnapping. They also found Marcus Bauer, concerned father and long-haul trucker, sitting calmly beside his traumatized son while two unconscious criminals lay nearby. His story was simple and convincing. He'd received threatening calls about his family, tracked them to this location, and arrived just in time to prevent something terrible from happening. The evidence supported his version completely. Lori's phone contained text messages detailing drug transactions and money transfers. Vernon's laptop held detailed records of embezzled funds and communications with criminal organizations. The warehouse itself contained enough heroin to put both of them away for decades. "Mr. Bauer," Agent Moore said after taking his initial statement, "you're lucky you weren't hurt. These people were involved in some very dangerous activities." Marcus nodded gravely. "I just wanted to find my son. I had no idea they were criminals." Agent Moore studied his face for any sign of deception and found nothing but a father's concern. Of course, she hadn't been trained to read the kind of deception Marcus specialized in. As the agents processed the crime scene, Austin and Taylor melted away into the urban landscape like they'd never existed. The weapons they'd carried were clean and untraceable, purchased with cash and destined for destruction. Their fingerprints weren't in any database. Their faces wouldn't appear on any surveillance footage, and their presence would never be acknowledged by anyone who mattered. They were ghosts, and ghosts left no evidence. Marcus watched as his wife was read her rights and led away in handcuffs. Lori looked back at him once, her expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. She'd planned so carefully, manipulated so cleverly, but she'd made one fatal error. She'd assumed Marcus would play by the same rules she did. "Daddy." Justin's voice was small and scared. "Is Mommy in trouble?" Marcus knelt beside his son, choosing his words carefully. "Mommy made some bad choices, buddy. She's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. Will she come home?" Marcus looked at the federal agents cataloging evidence that would keep Lori in prison for the next 20 years. "No, son. She won't be coming home." Vernon regained consciousness as they were loading him into an ambulance. His eyes found Marcus through the crowd of law enforcement officers, and Marcus saw recognition there, the understanding that he'd been outplayed by someone operating on a completely different level. Marcus leaned close enough to whisper, "You threatened my family. In my world, that's a capital offense. Consider yourself lucky that I chose prison over execution." Vernon tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Fear had stolen his voice, just as it had stolen his future. 3 hours later, Marcus and Justin sat in a diner 50 miles from Reno, sharing a meal and trying to process what had happened. Justin was handling it better than Marcus had expected. Children were remarkably resilient, especially when they felt safe again. "Dad, will we be okay? Just the two of us." Marcus studied his son's face, seeing traces of both himself and Lori, but recognizing that Justin was his own person, innocent of his mother's crimes and deserving of a fresh start. "We'll be better than okay," Marcus promised. "We'll be free." And they would be. The life Marcus had built as a truck driver was over, but that was fine. He had resources, connections, and skills that most people couldn't imagine. He could create a new identity, a new life, anywhere in the world. More importantly, he could create a life where his son would never have to worry about betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect him. Marcus pulled out his regular phone and deleted Lori's contact information, erasing the last electronic connection to 7 years of marriage. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. As they left the diner, Justin asked one final question. "Dad, what happened to the bad people? Will they ever get out?" Marcus thought about federal sentencing guidelines for drug trafficking and kidnapping, about the evidence that would ensure Lori and Vernon never saw freedom again, about the justice that sometimes came from careful planning rather than courtroom proceedings. "No, son," he said with absolute certainty. "They'll never get out." Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the deck of a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching Justin play with a golden retriever named Courage. They'd settled in a small coastal town in Oregon where nobody asked questions about their past, and everyone minded their own business. Marcus had legally changed their names to Michael and James Douglas, using connections and documentation that would withstand any investigation. Their new life was simple. Michael Douglas was a security consultant who worked from home, and James was a bright 8-year-old who'd adapted to his new school with remarkable resilience. The trial had made national news. Lori Garner and Vernon Reeves had been convicted on multiple federal charges, including kidnapping, drug trafficking, and money laundering. Lori received 25 years without parole. Vernon got 30, plus additional time for weapons charges and conspiracy. Neither had mentioned Marcus's real identity during their testimony. The evidence against them was so overwhelming that their lawyers had focused on plea bargains rather than wild theories about special operations veterans and elaborate revenge schemes. Marcus's old phone, the one that connected him to people like Tyrone and Casey, sat at the bottom of San Francisco Bay, along with any remaining connections to his previous life. He was done with violence, done with the darkness that had defined his first 42 years. But he wasn't naive. He kept weapons in the house, maintained situational awareness, and had contingency plans for various scenarios. Some lessons, once learned, couldn't be unlearned. "Dad," Justin called from the beach below. "Look what courage found." Marcus looked down to see his son holding up a piece of driftwood shaped vaguely like a boat. Justin's smile was genuine, untroubled by the memories of that warehouse in Reno. Children healed faster than adults, especially when they felt secure. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. "Final divorce papers processed. All assets transferred as requested. You're officially a free man." The divorce had been straightforward. Lori had lost all legal rights to marital property when she was convicted of federal crimes. Everything Marcus had worked for over 7 years, the house, the savings, the truck, even Justin's college fund, now belonged solely to him. More importantly, Lori had lost all parental rights. Justin would never have to visit his mother in prison, never have to reconcile his love for her with her crimes, never have to wonder if the woman who'd betrayed their family might someday return to harm them again. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay closed forever. That evening, as Justin worked on homework at the kitchen table, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Casey Swanson stood on the front porch, looking older than his years, but still carrying himself like the operator he'd once been. "Michael Douglas?" Casey smiled at the name. "Nice choice. Literary, but not pretentious. What are you doing here, Case?" "Wanted to check on you both. Make sure you were settling in okay." Casey glanced through the window at Justin, who was concentrating on math problems with his tongue sticking out slightly. "Kid looks happy." "He is. We both are." Casey nodded approvingly. "Good. You deserve some peace after everything you've been through." He paused, studying Marcus's face. "You know, there are people who'd pay very well for someone with your particular skills. If you ever get bored with retirement." "No." Marcus's voice carried absolute finality. "That part of my life is over. Just saying, the offer's always there. Some problems require permanent solutions, and there aren't many people qualified to provide them." Marcus understood. In the shadowy world of international security and corporate problem-solving, his reputation would always precede him. There would always be someone willing to pay for his expertise in eliminating threats quietly and efficiently. But that Marcus Bauer was dead, buried under the weight of choices that had prioritized violence over family, mission completion over personal happiness. Michael Douglas was a different man entirely, a father who put his son's well-being above everything else. "Case? The men who helped me in Reno, Austin, and Taylor. Make sure they know I appreciate what they did. They know. And they're proud to have served with you one last time." Casey turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Marcus, what you did to protect your boy, that's the kind of mission that reminds us why we do this work." After Casey left, Marcus sat on his deck and thought about the choices that had brought him here. He'd lost a wife who'd never really loved him, eliminated threats to his son's safety, and destroyed people who'd thought they could manipulate him with impunity. Some would call it justice. Others would call it revenge. Marcus called it necessity. The predators were gone. The pack was safe. And in a world that often rewarded the ruthless while punishing the innocent, that was the best ending anyone could ask for. Inside the house, Justin called out, "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" Marcus smiled and went to help his son, leaving the darkness outside where it belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new reasons to be grateful for the simple pleasure of being a father. Today, that was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.